there's kind of a lot that happened this weekend. I mean, there's a lot that happened in the world of sports, obviously with the NFL draft happening over the weekend and, et cetera, and the various pro sports things. But in the world of Pitt sports, there was a lot that happened, and not even talking about the NFL draft, although there was certainly some relevant developments there with 3 Pitt players getting drafted, a few more getting signed as undrafted free agents. But we're not going to be able to talk about that today. We're going to have to save that for another day. And then there was relevant news that broke kind of late in the week with a couple of transfers deciding that they're going to come to Pitt. But we're not really going to be able to... Well, we're going to talk about some of that today, but not all of it. We'll break down... I think there were 3 guys who committed as transfers, basically since Thursday night. And we're going to talk about one of them in particular because the biggest story to come out of Pitt sports this weekend, at least in my view, is the quarterback situation. Julian Duggar announcing on Saturday night that he's going into the transfer portal. He leaves Pitt after 1 season and 2 spring camps. And I got some thoughts on that because I think there's I'm not going to say it's like a tangled web, but I mean, there's a lot of different sort of angles about this situation with Pitt's quarterback room. For as much as we talked about the quarterback room throughout spring camp, when we talked about, I talked about how interesting the quarterback room was and, the development of this guy and the return of that guy and, all the different angles. And there were a lot of things and there were a lot of interesting things. And Julian Duggar was a big part of that. Now he's not. What does it mean for Pitt's quarterback room with the remaining players? How does the new transfer they're bringing in fit into the whole thing? And what does the situation look like going forward now that they're minus a scholarship quarterback, a guy who was here last year, and they added a scholarship quarterback who was not here last year? He's coming in as a transfer. Very interesting situation. I think there's a lot of things to read into. We're going to make some assumptions. We're going to make some extrapolations. We're going to talk about what we know, what we think, what we, as I say, assume, even though we know that's always a dangerous path. Got a lot of thoughts on the quarterback situation. I'm looking forward to talking about it. So we're talking quarterbacks today on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday on the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Glad to be hanging out with you this morning. You see the website right there, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com on the 247 Sports Network, where we're talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. We got all the coverage there that you can possibly handle, football, basketball, recruiting, everything else. And then we've got message boards to talk about all of these things. And there have been plenty of things to talk about this weekend with the draft, with the transfer portal, with players leaving, with players coming. There's a lot to discuss, and the Pitt fans are talking about it on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfers, and even a few other things that don't necessarily fit into those categories. We're talking about all of it right there at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, our YouTube channel right here, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place where we have all of our Pitt video content. These daily Morning Pitt videos that we do every day of the week, Monday through Friday, our weekly live show that we do on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett get together and talk Pitt sports with you. And it really is with you. It's not just me and Jim talking to each other. You're part of the conversation as well. There's a chat screen on the right, and everybody posts their comments and questions in there. And so we have a good back and forth. It's fun. We have a good time every Wednesday night. We've certainly had a lot to talk about the past few weeks, and given the events of this weekend, it's going to be more. We're going to have more to talk about this week. So make sure you tune in Wednesday night at 8:30. And to make sure you don't miss any of our Pitt video content here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, like this video and subscribe to the channel, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on your notifications and you'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live, every time we post new content. And that way you won't miss anything. Like this video and subscribe, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So Saturday night, 7:30 or so, I think it was, 20 to 8, somewhere around there. Julian Duggar posted that he was leaving Pitt. Redshirt freshman quarterback from Penn Hills, spent 1 season at Pitt, and is moving on. Is going to play the remainder of his college eligibility somewhere other than the University of Pittsburgh. And I'll say right off the bat, and I'll probably repeat this a number of times, I'm a big Julian Duggar fan. I think he has a chance to be really good. I liked what I saw out of him at Penn Hills. The summer before his senior year, before he was even committed to Pitt, I saw him I actually saw him like 2 years in a row at a camp over the summer, the 210ths camp at Shadyside Academy. I think I saw him 2 years in a row there. And the second year, I mean, he just looked awesome. He was the best player at the camp, just dropping dimes all over the place. And that was just a camp setting. He wasn't really getting out and running and showing that other part of his game. And I don't even think at Penn Hills he really was. I don't think you really got the full picture of how good and how effective he could be. And he came to Pitt, and like, look, there was a lot of. I can't say there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of hype from me. You know what I mean? I think I talked him up. I was pretty excited about it. We had Carlo Zavko, the former Pitt recruiting. I don't know what his title was, but he worked in the recruiting department at Pitt. They have all these different titles over there. But you remember, he joined us at one point, I think prior to signing day. I guess it would have been in the fall of 2023. And he was talking about how hyped he was for Julian Duggar, how he believed Duggar could be a big-time player. And I believed it. I bought in. I mean, I thought all the tools were there. The size was there. The running ability was there. The big arm. He's a lefty, which is a little bit unique. But, I mean, I think he was good enough. He had a strong arm. He could make all the throws. And we never really saw him. For some reason, he was on the depth chart. He was buried on the depth chart behind David Lynch, even the walk-on, until we got to the Game Above Sports Bowl against Toledo in Detroit. And Lynch got the start there. Mercifully, they finally pulled Lynch and put in Julian Duggar, and he damn near led him to victory. Now, granted, he wasn't perfect in that game. He threw a pick six. You don't do that. Maybe the game never has to go to 6 overtimes or however many it is. But there was a real point during that game where if they had won, Duggar probably would have been the player of the game, and deservedly so. He changed the game. And, like, I know there's been a lot of comments throughout the weekend after the news of him transferring. A lot of comments of, oh, great. Oh, darn. Lost the guy who threw for 72 yards against Toledo in a meaningless bowl game. And you're right. But that's the only sample size we have of Julian Duggar playing in a college football game. And what we saw, I think, looks incredibly promising. And I think where he goes next, he's got a pretty good chance to be pretty good. I really believe that. And I'm saying all this right off the bat because whatever we talk about, whatever we say over the next 15 minutes or however long, 10 minutes that we sit here and talk, I really think Julian Duggar can be a really good player. And I want to be very clear about that. What level he goes to, I don't know. I think he could play at this level, but maybe to play sooner, he might want to look at the MAC or something like that, and get on the field sooner and maybe do the old, go back to the drawing board for 2 years. Go to the MAC. Be really good for 2 years, and then transfer back to a P4 school for your final year, and really kind of make your case as a pro prospect if that's what you're intending to do. So, we'll see where Julian Duggar ends up going, and we'll obviously keep an eye on his career and wish him the best. But why would he go? You are taking 2 years of, at least 2 years of spring camps plus a full training camp and a full season where you spent learning this offense, learning this system, getting developed in this offense, and growing in this offense. And you're basically walking away from it to go start over and play somewhere else. To learn a brand new offense with all new terminology and new coaches and everything like that. And it's not impossible to do. It's less likely when you're there in your first year. It's even less likely when you're there in your first year without having been there for spring camp. I mean, you could turn around and say, oh, well, Eli Holstein came to Pitt last year in his first year, and he went out and, played well and all that stuff. But he also had all of spring camp. I mean, if you're Duggar or any of these guys transferring in the spring, you're going somewhere with something totally new, a totally new system, totally new terminology, all those new things to learn, and you just have the summer to do it. You don't have spring camp, those extra 15 practices and film sessions and all those things to fall back on. That's neither here nor there. Julian Duggar and the people around him felt like it was the best move for him. I think people who watch these YouTube videos and read these YouTube comments, read the comments on our YouTube videos will probably not be surprised to learn that, we've heard there was probably a strong sentiment around Julian Duggar that he should explore this route, that he should get away from Pitt and go find somewhere else to play. That's neither here nor there. But I think there are a few other things to consider. And one of the biggest ones is Mason Heinch. I am not going to sit here and say I know why Julian Duggar's transferring. I think there's probably a lot of reasons. I think there's probably a number of considerations at play. But I do think that by the end of spring camp, it's a pretty distinct possibility he had been passed by Mason Heinch on the depth chart. There have been enough people I've talked to who watched practice all through the spring, watched the scrimmages and the practices, who said, Heinch at times was not just the second best quarterback on the team, but sometimes the best quarterback on the team. You saw what happened in the blue gold game draft when the players, the teammates, selected Heinch over Duggar. Not necessarily because they don't believe in Duggar, but they obviously made it more of a priority to get Heinch on the roster and took him first. And I don't want to read too much into that. I think there's always a lot of things. I mean, Heinch was drafted before Holstein, and we all said, what's going on? And then we ultimately found out that was sort of predetermined that Holstein was going to be on the team he ended up being on. So when the other team was drafting, there was no point for them to take a quarterback. It was understood that Holstein would end up there. So we don't want to read too much into the fact that the players drafted Heinch over Duggar, but we can't entirely ignore it either. These are guys who are practice every day. These are guys who watch film every day. These are guys who know what the offense is and what the play calls are and what's supposed to happen. And they said, this is the guy we've seen make plays. And everything we've heard, everything that, when we talk to people who watch practice, we talk to people who watch the scrimmages, Mason Heinch was pretty good this spring. Like, to the point where, and I said this on the message boards yesterday, I heard a lot of things that felt like borderline hyperbole that I didn't even care to repeat because it would seem almost too ridiculous, but that's how high the praise is. And everybody you talk to who watches practice has sort of the same review that Mason Heinch was really good this year, the freshman quarterback from Oregon, Ohio. And I would have to think that that's not insignificant when we're talking about the reasons of why a promising young quarterback would decide to leave. If he senses that he's not just behind the returning starter, but also behind the early enrolling freshman, then, yeah, maybe that's a decision you have to make. And then there's the other side of it. Or not even the other side of it, but another country heard from here, and that's Cole Gonzalez, the former Western Carolina quarterback who went into the transfer portal in December, transferred to Oklahoma, spent the spring in Norman, and is now coming to Pitt. Went back into the transfer portal, and he's going to be a Panther. Obviously, Gonzalez, the obvious history is at Western Carolina, where he played with Cade Bell. He had 2 seasons, played in like 19 games. 19 games over the course of 2 seasons, completed 65% of his passes, threw for like 4,100 yards, 39 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions over the course of 2 years with Cade Bell. He's got familiarity and chemistry with Desmond Reed, Raphael Williams, Sensor Lee, a bunch of these guys at Pitt, these Pitt offensive weapons who played with Cole Gonzalez at Western Carolina. And I think, when you look at the timeline of Twitter announcements, Cole Gonzalez announced, I think it was around 5:30 or so on Saturday, that he was going to be transferring to Pitt. About 2 hours later, Duggar announced that he was going into the portal. So I think Gonzalez announced his transfer around 5:30 on Saturday, and Duggar announced his intention to transfer around 7:30 on Saturday. And so there was some immediate reaction saying, Duggar saw that Cole Gonzalez was coming in, so he decided to transfer. But I don't think the timeline actually lines up that way because the transfer portal window closed on Friday. Friday was the last day for football players to enter the transfer portal. And so even though Duggar announced it on Saturday, it's a decision he would have had to make earlier than that. He would have had to decide and put in his paperwork by Friday. So even though Gonzalez announced 2 hours before Duggar, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the order in which the decisions were actually made or acted upon. And I think, and I've gotten sort of this impression from different sources I've talked to. I think Pitt ramped up its interest in Gonzalez, or I get the sense that Pitt ramped up its interest in Gonzalez as they began to get the sense that Duggar was considering a transfer. Look, there are very few things I think that surprise coaches things that happen. I think they generally have a sense of when most things are coming. Commitments don't usually come out. Sometimes they come out of nowhere, but they don't usually come out of nowhere. Guys going into the transfer portal they don't usually come out of nowhere. Coaches usually have a sense of what is going on with guys. And it might be because they talk to the player themselves. It might be senses they pick up from, other coaches on the staff or players on the team. It may be conversations they've had with family members, and particularly in this era of college sports where you have NIL deals and negotiations and asking prices and all those kinds of things, you might have a pretty good idea coming out of spring camp when you have meetings with all the players and certain guys ask for certain amounts and you say, well, that's not going to happen. You're, whatever position on the depth chart, you're not going to get paid like the guy 3 positions ahead of you or 2 positions ahead of you. And so, you get a sense already. And I think as over the course of the last week, I think the staff had gotten a sense that Duggar could be looking to move. And my sort of read is that they worked on Gonzalez more as a result to try to get him in. Now, Cade Bell very well may have wanted to add another quarterback anyway to get the room up to 4 scholarship quarterbacks. He told us in spring camp he was happy with the 3 they had. That Eli Holstein, Mason Heinch, and Julian Duggar, he thought they were really good. He thought, it was good enough. They'd be happy with that group, and that's all he really wanted. He just wanted to develop those guys. I believe him, but I think he probably would have liked to get a 4th guy in anyway. Certainly he didn't want to go into the season with only 2. So whether he was pushing for Gonzalez before they got the sense that Duggar might leave or really just kind of turned up the dial after they got the sense that Duggar might leave, I think they were probably working toward it. So I don't see a lot of connection in terms of Duggar leaving because of Gonzalez. I would say more they got Gonzalez because they thought Duggar was going to leave. That's kind of how, which is ultimately what ended up happening. That's kind of how I see it. So what is the situation now? What does the quarterback room look like? Well, you've got Eli Holstein as a returning starter, a guy who, won his first 7 career starts and then lost his next 3 career starts because, he did start the Virginia game, he started the SMU game, and he started the Louisville game, and Pitt ultimately lost all 3 of those, even though he got hurt in 2 out of the 3 and didn't finish the SMU game because it was such a blowout. But 7-3 in his first year as a starter, very good. You've got Cole Gonzalez, who's coming in, who's got 19 games of experience playing for Cade Bell, playing in Cade Bell's offense. He knows the system. He knows the terminology. There's always little tweaks and things that have changed over the last 2 years, but he should have a working knowledge of how this offense works and how to operate in it. And then you've got Mason Heinch, the freshman wunderkind sensation who has seemingly got everybody in the South Side excited. And I think, late in spring camp or after spring camp ended, I did one of these morning pits and I said, Pitt's quarterback room got far more interesting this offseason. I think I might have written an article like that too. Well, it just keeps getting more interesting. I think when it would have been much better to have Duggar than to lose him. But when you add Cole Gonzalez to the group, it gets really interesting because now you've got, I think you've got a lot of things. You've got depth. So whoever is the starter, if they go down, you've got good options behind them. But you've also got, I think, 3 really good competitors to fight for this starting quarterback job. I think Eli Holstein was QB1 entering spring camp. I think he was QB1 exiting spring camp. I think they're going to continue to prop him up as QB1 throughout the offseason. But when training camp arrives, I think you've got 2 guys in Mason Heinch and Cole Gonzalez who could very much push for that starting job, each for their own reasons. Heinch for his talent and kind of how he has learned the offense in the time that he's been on campus, the almost 5 months that he's been on campus. And Gonzalez, again, a talented player who knows the offense really well. You've got 2 guys who are positioned to compete for that starting job with Eli Holstein. And if Holstein is the starter when they play Duquesne on the 30th or whatever day that is in August, he'll have earned it because I think he's got 2 guys who are going to push him. And so whoever is the starting quarterback will have earned it. And I think, I would say one other thing, I think there'll be a competition in August, but I also think, what's the best way to say this? The competition will continue into the season, but more so, I think there are options there with Heinch and Gonzalez and Holstein that whoever the two that aren't the starter at the beginning of the season, if the starter falters or struggles, they've got two guys that they would feel very comfortable about going to, probably without hesitation. And so a very interesting situation, I think, found a way to actually get more interesting over the weekend. Disappointing to see Julian Duggar go, very much, because I was looking forward to seeing him this year and seeing him in that competition as well. But adding Cole Gonzalez makes things interesting. And I think also what Duggar's departure might tell us about Mason Heinch and how he's viewed and how he progressed this spring. I think that's pretty interesting too. So very interesting situation, Pitt's quarterback. Not necessarily a bad problem to have, but a very interesting situation. And that's probably the word we will use a lot over the next 4 months. All right. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the other transfers who are coming in. We didn't get a chance to talk about the NFL draft, but we've got more days this week to do it. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And then, head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com, to get all the Pitt sports coverage. Thanks for watching today. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you have a good Monday. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.